tonight on NewsCenter. It's that all-important exam day here in Korea. The country's stock market and offices open late to reduce traffic, and planes are grounded to reduce noise. The country's highest court upholds the life sentence of the captain of a ferry that capsized in 2014, killing more than 300 people, most of them high school students. And a wait-and-see stance. Bank of Korea keeps interest rates at a record low, maintaining a wait-and-see stance for 5 months on signs of economic recovery. It's Thursday, November 12th, 2015. Good evening to our viewers in Korea and hello to those around the world. I'm Moon Conn-young. Now, there are 630,000 and more young Koreans taking the standardized college scholastic ability test today. They are done today, but while the focus of the entire nation seemed to be on those test takers on this Thursday, there are others in the high school graduation class choosing not to take the exam. Some are choosing to take the less traditional path, perhaps with much realization that good exam scores in prestigious university placements are no longer the only guarantees of a career. Our Lee-soon went out to meet them.
The day before the annual college scholastic ability test in Korea, high schools usually allow students to return home earlier than usual so that they can get their rest and make last-minute preparations for the next day's exam. But not all schools. At this particular boarding school is still not lights out yet, as students hone their mechanical skills well into the night. This is one of Korea's Meister high schools, a special kind of vocational school designed to provide students educational experiences tailored to the needs of their respective industries. This one in particular specializes in the fields of automobile and mechanical manufacturing. Most students from this school head straight into the workforce upon graduation.
I didn't come to this high school to go to college. I came so that I can get a job. So even if other students take the college entrance exam, for me, learning the skills and getting certification as soon as I can are more important.
Meister School students train and study for certification as much as other students prepare for their college entrance exams. It's my dream to become a master in my field.
There are other options for students who opt to enter the workforce instead of pursuing college education. They could take classes in hairstyling and makeup at private academies like this beauty academy in Seoul.
My mom recommended that I try out a career in the beauty industry. I started because I really wanted to learn makeup and also because I felt that it'd be better to start working right away instead of going to college.
Students in middle school and high school decide on their dreams early on in life and come to the academy with their parents to see what it's like.
It's true, many high school seniors who decided not to take the college entrance exam today have their own goals in life, and these institutions help them get closer to achieving their dreams.
Escaping the typical decision of going to college, some brave high school students in Korea are choosing, on their own will, to go straight into joining the workforce. And luckily for them, Korea's educational policies are becoming more dynamic, like allowing them to work and study at the same time.
Currently, the country's education and labor industries jointly operate 9 test institutions as dual apprenticeship schools, where high school students can go to work for a couple of days a week or for a set period of the year and study at school for the rest.
The policy of simultaneous work and study will be established in the direction of employment first, college later.
The ministries plan to expand the joint project to a total of 60 institutions by next year, and then implement the co-op system at all vocational schools in Korea by 2017.
In Korea, it's the schools that train these meisters. In other countries, the industries assume that role. The curriculum at Korea's Meister schools invests a lot of time in providing professional training on skills that can be used at the workplace.
This year, out of the 480,000 high school seniors in Korea, roughly 120,000 did not apply to take the CSAT or the College Scholastic Ability Test.
I would say that in 7 to 8 years, everyone will go to college. But the difference is that students may choose to take 2 to 3 years.
As more students find their ideal jobs and career paths outside the conventional classroom, Korea's educational policies are also evolving to better accommodate and nurture their growth in becoming professionals in their fields of expertise. 이수은, Arirang News.
But for those taking the more traditional path, it was the moment of truth as they took this year's college entrance exam. Now, this exam is one of the most important, not to mention stressful events in a high school student's life here in this country. And as the exam is notoriously tough, everything feasible was done to make things easier for these young exam takers. Our Kwon Jang-ho brings us this report.
It was the annual college exam day in Korea. In the early morning, students arrived nervously at their designated test sites. They were cheered on by their schoolmates and given words of encouragement by their teachers, while parents watched anxiously as their children went in to face one of the most important moments of their lives. The public was also involved in making things easier for the exam takers. To ease the morning rush hour traffic, companies started work an hour late, including banks and the stock market. Additional buses, subway trains and taxis were put in service, and even planes were grounded for 35 minutes during the listening comprehension portion of the exam. The police also helped out, providing emergency rides for students who found themselves running late. Younger students were doing their part as well. It has become a tradition for students to cheer on their upperclassmen on exam day. Such was the case of this group that they waited since 9 p.m. of the previous day.
We wanted to save the best spot from where we can cheer them. I've been up all night and of course I'm tired, but if it's for our seniors, then I'm always ready and willing.
Many students study day in and night out for months and even years for this exam, leading to criticism that the exam puts too much burden on students.
I am jealous of students in other countries. They don't go through the same hardships as we do. They may take exams, but they're not as extreme as ours. I wish I could go to those countries.
And after all that studying, it all comes down to just one single day.
The whole of a student's life hangs in the balance of how you feel on one day. I hope a better system can be introduced in the future.
The Korean and math sections are said to have been difficult this year, while the English portion was a bit more forgiving. But it will be a few weeks before the students find out the results. The exam results will be released on December 2nd. Until then, the students have a long, nervous wait. But for now, at least it's over. Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News.
It's been more than a year since the Seoul-ho ferry sank, taking the lives of more than 300 passengers, most of them high school students. Had they survived the accident, many would have been taking the college entrance exam today, but only the 70-some survivors got to sit the test. On this exam day, Korea's Supreme Court upheld the murder conviction and life sentence for the captain of the ferry who fled the vessel without issuing an evacuation order to his passengers. Our Kim Min-ji has the latest.
Life imprisonment for murder. Seoul's top court has upheld a lower court ruling for Lee Jun-suk, the captain of the ill-fated Seoul ferry that sank last year, taking the lives of more than 300 people, most of them high school students. The Supreme Court ruled that Lee had committed willful negligence, saying that he fled the ship without giving an evacuation order. The Chief Justice said the captain could have warned the passengers about the situation, which in turn could have reduced the number of deaths, but he failed to do so, neglecting his duties as the ship's captain. Survivors of the fatal accident said he ordered passengers to stay put, even as he was one of the first to be rescued. The Supreme Court also upheld jail sentences for 14 members of Lee's crew, ranging from 18 months to 12 years. The bereaved families shed tears as a verdict was read out.
This conviction is the least that can be done to pay for the painful time we have gone through for the past 1 year and 7 months.
On April 16, 2014, a total of 304 people died when the Seoul ferry capsized off Korea's southwestern coast in one of the country's deadliest maritime disasters on record. Divers recovered 295 bodies from the ship's wreckage and surrounding waters, but 9 victims are still missing. Shanghai Salvage, a Chinese state-run consortium, has been hired to handle the job of salvaging the Seoul ferry. The company is aiming to lift it onto a floating deck by early next year and have the vessel on shore by mid-2016. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
In line with market expectations, Korea's central bank held its key rate steady at 1.5%. The decision comes ahead of the U.S. Federal Reserve meeting next month, where policymakers are expected to raise the interest rate for the first time since June 2006. For more on the latest from the central bank, we go live to our economics correspondent, Hwang Ji-hye. Ji-hye, what was behind the BOK's decision?
Conn-young, as you said, the Bank of Korea decided to stand pat on its record low key interest rate in November, leaving the rate unchanged for a 5th straight month. While the local economy is showing signs of a recent pickup thanks to improving domestic demand, the top central banker says the growth momentum is not strong enough.
There was an upswing in third-quarter consumption, but we also believe the economy is just returning to its normal pace before it was hit by the MERS outbreak.
Uncertainties linger abroad as well. Expectations are growing that the U.S. Federal Reserve will raise its interest rate when it meets again just before Christmas, after the world's biggest economy posted strong job growth last month. Analysts say that given the uncertainty about the Fed's rate hike, a further rate cut at home could cause instability in the local financial market, especially at a time when household debt is rising at a rapid pace.
A possible rate hike from the Fed would prompt a capital outflow from emerging economies. What's important here is how large the outflow is going to be.
But the central bank differentiates Korea from other emerging economies, saying it's confident about the country's fundamentals like its massive current account surplus and foreign reserves. That's why some analysts expect another rate cut in the first half of next year, citing sluggish exports due to slowing demand from China. They add that other than the U.S., most countries like China and Japan are maintaining their easy monetary policies. The Bank of Korea governor was cautious, though, about offering any hints at what could lie ahead, saying that China will be able to grow in the 6 to 7% range for the time being, and that it's more important for the Korean economy to focus on structural reforms than to rev up the recovery momentum. Conn-young?
Right, a wait-and-see approach by the nation's central bank for the 5th straight month. Thank you, Ji-hye, for that reporting. It is now definite Korea's rival parties will miss Friday's deadline to reach an agreement on redrawing the country's electoral districts ahead of general elections in April. But they did agree on one thing. They'll try to negotiate the terms with one another for another month. Arirang's parliamentary correspondent Kim Young-gil has more.
The ruling Saenuri Party is against increasing the number of seats in the National Assembly from the current 300. Instead, it wants to increase the number of constituencies and reduce the number of proportional representatives who are chosen based on the total number of votes each party gets. The party believes this will make room for more rural constituencies.
The Saenuri Party is doing all it can to prevent the loss of seats in rural regions by lowering the number of proportional representatives. But the opposition bloc is only thinking about trying to keep the current number of proportional representatives the same.
There are currently 54 lawmakers elected through the proportional representation system, and the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy Party wants to maintain that number. It believes that doing otherwise would stoke regionalism in Korean politics.
Our basic policy is to maintain the current number of proportional representatives and prevent the expansion of assembly seats. We'll also do our best to prevent the loss of seats for rural areas.
Last year, the Constitutional Court ruled that electoral boundaries should be readjusted to address the problem of unequal representation, which has arisen because of changes to the population. Under the plan currently up for consideration, the number of urban electoral districts would increase while the number of rural constituencies would decrease in accordance with the shrinking of rural populations. The two parties hope to reach agreement on a rezoning scheme before the current parliamentary session ends in December. Amid the deadlock, lawmakers did pass some 40 pending livelihood bills on Thursday. They also agreed to extend the life of the Special Parliamentary Political Reform Committee by a month to continue their discussions on readjusting the electoral map. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
A once powerful key aide to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, who was thought to have been purged, may in fact have been sent to a top re-education facility. Our Kim Ji-yeon reports on the possible whereabouts of Choi Dong-hae, the secretary of the ruling Workers' Party and once among the most powerful in the North.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has reportedly sent one of his close aides to the regime's top school for re-education. Government sources in South Korea who declined to be identified said Thursday that Choi Dong-hae, the secretary of North Korea's ruling Workers' Party, is receiving training at the Kim Il-sung Higher Party School, named after the country's founder. Questions about Choi's whereabouts arose this week after he was excluded from a roster of a preparatory committee led by Kim Jong-un set up after the death of Dear Seo, the marshal of North Korea's military. Some experts believe he is being punished for his poor handling of youth-related affairs, while others think it may have been related to problems with the construction of a dam near Mount Paektu. North Korea has also reportedly replaced a military commander who was directly involved in the deadly landmine blast that wounded 2 South Korean soldiers back in August. Kim Sang-yong, the former commander of the North's 2nd Corps, has been sent to the 9th Corps, far from the inter-Korean border. As for Choi, this wouldn't be the first time being punished. He was sent to a re-education facility in 2004, and he was demoted in 1998 due to problems arising from a rural project of a sewage system. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Staying in North Korea, that regime is boosting its weapons capabilities, which means a new approach to diplomacy is needed. That's according to North Korea expert Joel Witt, who is in Seoul for a seminar today focusing on Pyongyang's nuclear future. Our Song Ji-san shares with us some of his insights and predictions.
It's been over 30 years since North Korea began developing its weapons delivery systems, but they have now reached a point where they're more focused on boosting their weapons capabilities.
There are a lot of different things they'll be doing in terms of improving the quality of their weapons. And it's not increasing the size of the stockpile goes without saying, but they'll probably work on more miniaturization of warheads. They'll work on reducing the amount of nuclear material in each of the warheads.
The co-founder of North Korea monitoring website 38 North said at a seminar in Seoul on Thursday, Pyongyang's nuclear arsenal could be as large as 100 by 2020 if the regime is able to carry out a nuclear test each year. Also at the seminar, weapons engineer John Schilling made note of the regime's increased emphasis on submarines since Kim Jong-un came to power in 2011, pointing to the regime's first ocean-going submarine in 20 years.
25 years ago, under the regime of Kim Il-sung, North Korea had a very substantial program for building large ocean-going submarines. Under Kim Jong-un, much more renewed emphasis on the larger submarines and on missile capability.
This, of course, with the aim of conducting more missile tests. Meanwhile, Witt also speculated on how the North's possession of nukes could shape the Korean peninsula in the future.
Having nuclear weapons will change the reunification picture because a nuclear North Korea is going to think, well, gee, reunification is only going to happen on our terms, and we have the nuclear weapons to back it up.
With the international community's attempts at engaging the regime in dialogue, the six-party denuclearization talks, for example, in a virtual coma for years, we proposed a new approach to diplomacy that involves not just sanctions, but something that could pique the North's interest enough to keep it from building more nuclear weapons. 송지선, Arirang News.
We reported early last month of the World Economic Forum's release of its annual Global Competitiveness Report. It stirred controversy here in this country because the report ranked South Korea behind Ghana and Uganda in the financial sector. Well, within hours of that report, ranking South Korea at 119th in ease of access to loans, 113th in soundness of banks, 99th in the availability of financial services, and 87th for financial market development, but overall 26th among 140 member countries. Seoul's Financial Supervisory Service released a statement saying that the Swiss organization fell short of making objective comparisons. Well, I met with the very author of the World Economic Forum's Global Competitiveness Report, Margareta Duzernik, to ask her why the poor assessment of Korea's financial system, most of all, the soundness of banks.
Well, this indicator is based on the survey of business executives in each of those countries. And what is important to keep in mind is that obviously when they answer this question, they take into account the situation in the country. So an efficient financial system in South Korea may not look the same, may not have the same qualities and the same characteristics than in Uganda or in another African country. And that's why, there's a discrepancy in those rankings. You need to keep into account the stage of development the country is in, and indirectly, the respondents take this into account as well. So they have higher demands from the South Korean policymakers in order to stabilize the financial system.
What are some areas that you believe South Korea should work on to improve its rankings in the Global Competitiveness Report?
Well, one area that clearly stands out is the flexibility of the labor markets. So this is where South Korea receives its lowest ranking. It is an area where a lot can be done in order to improve the use of the highly educated labor force and to increase the turnover and the speed of change. It would allow businesses to more easily adapt to the business cycle, to changing situations. Korea does really well on the access to education. So the enrollment rates are very, very high. But when we look at the quality of education, there is some room for improvement. It's a good ranking. It's 35th worldwide, so it's not a bad situation. But I think for an advanced economy like South Korea, there could be some room for improvements in terms of the quality. And going forward, this is going to be even more important. And also in terms of the flexibility of the labor market, which is still very low. And going forward, when such situation where there's a need for the economy to adapt arise, it is important that the labor market is flexible as well, and that additional training is provided to the workforce so that it can keep up with the changes as well.
When you say flexibility in the labor market, could you be more specific on that?
Well, it's essentially regulation about how to hire workers. So this is one important aspect of it. But one important aspect is also the flexibility of the wage setting mechanisms. So if the wage setting mechanisms are very centralized, then this results in a weak ranking in this area. Another area is the relationship between the employers and the employees. If it's very conflictual, then this is also not good, obviously, for adjusting to change and for the labor market flexibility.
What are some of the strong points then of South Korea?
Some of the strong points are, in particular, the strong macroeconomic environment that has been strong for quite a while. As I said, the education system in terms of the quantity, the access to education is also excellent, which is great news because there's a very strong base in terms of human capital. Also, in terms of innovation, Korea is doing relatively well. There's some room for improvement there, but it's doing relatively well in terms of innovation as well. I think, well, this is one of the areas we're looking for in the review of the index as well. How does a country, good as a country is creating ideas, right? And ideas and having appetite for entrepreneurial risk within the population. So it's not just about the framework. There are many factors that are related to education, to actually early childhood education as well, on how children learn to approach risk, how they deal with failure. These are long-term processes that need to be put in place through the education system in order to develop a more entrepreneurial culture. This is one aspect. And in South Korea, there's also a great tradition of working for the large corporations as well. So I think these are factors that take time to change. This is not going to change in a short period of time, because these are deeply seated cultural factors that have developed over a long time as well. All right.
The sheer number of people arriving on European shores is evidence that this is the biggest refugee crisis facing Europe since the Second World War. For more on the situation, Deutsche Welle political correspondent Tom Espero joins us from the Chancellery in Berlin. Thomas, Germany announced it is again applying Dublin rules on asylum for Syrian refugees. Now, this is a move that's a U-turn on a migration policy followed since August, is it not?
It is indeed a U-turn. It's important to explain actually what these Dublin regulations mean, because they mean that those migrants must be returned to the first country in the EU where they entered, where they registered. Germany had stopped these Dublin regulations in the summer when the flow was actually very, very big. And then it has announced now that it will try and reinstate those Dublin regulations as a way of controlling the flow here in Germany. There are practical problems to that because many of the migrants that are here in Germany did not register. Another problem is that they plan to make decisions on a case-by-case basis. But this in general means that Germany is trying to control the flow, to try and bring some order to the influx, because it's a very, very big challenge for Germany.
Thomas, what about other European countries? The latest we've heard is that Sweden is introducing a temporary border checks to control the flow of migrants into that country.
That's correct, and it's important here as well that this is not only a German problem. In fact, it's a European-wide challenge, and in fact, I would say a very big challenge for the European Union as such. And in that sense, every country has been trying through different means to control the situation in their countries. But what Angela Merkel has been trying, what other European leaders have been trying, is to find a common European response to that. That's also a very important side to this story and a challenge that Europe has. Will they get a common European policy? That's a very big issue here in Europe.
Right, Thomas, and will they be able to reach a common policy? That is what European Union leaders are discussing in Malta. They have been there, meeting there. Any developments on that front?
Well, they're meeting in Malta with African leaders, in fact, because a third aspect, one aspect is the German aspect here, a second aspect is the European that we've just addressed. The third one is trying to work with the countries that are outside of Europe and where some of those refugees actually come from. Some of those refugees come from African countries. Africa is also an important route where some of those migrants go through on their way to Europe, and they have been meeting in Malta to try and work together with those African countries in order to stop the flow from there. What Europe has promised is more money, more development aid, and in return, what Europe wants is more cooperation from those African leaders.
That was Deutsche Welle political correspondent Tom Espero reporting for us from Berlin. Thank you, Thomas.
My pleasure.
Kurdish forces backed by U.S. airstrikes are battling Islamic State to retake a town of northern Iraq. Bruce Harrison joins me in the studio. Bruce, the Kurdish military seems to claim that they have secured several villages.
Hello, Conn-young. They've apparently taken back several areas near the town of Sinjar. It's strategic because if Kurdish forces capture that town, it would cut off a key supply line for the Islamic State.
Right, but there's more at stake here than damaging just a supply line.
The people living in that region want to take their homes back, including the Yazidi people. The Islamic State's killing and enslaving thousands of them. The Islamic State's doing that because they don't practice Islam, and the killing is what prompted the U.S. to begin airstrikes. Obama first authorized airstrikes against Islamic State last year, in part to prevent genocide of Yazidis. Now, ahead of the current offensive, Kurdish forces and the U.S. military said the number of Islamic State fighters in Sinjar jumped to nearly 600 after reinforcements arrived.
It's our duty to liberate Sinjar from injustice, and this is the duty of every Kurdish citizen, and this is what President Masoud Barzani told us to do.
The assault had been delayed for weeks by weather and friction between various Kurdish and Yazidi forces in Sinjar. FIFA's approved 5 candidates for its presidential election. The World Soccer body is dealing with its worst crisis in history after banning several high-ranking officials, including President Sepp Blatter. The head of the Union of European Football Associations, Michel Platini, was once the front-runner to replace President Blatter, but he's being investigated by FIFA. He allegedly received $2 million from FIFA in 2011. Liberia's Musa Batili was ruled out of the field on integrity grounds. FIFA's been scrambling for stability since the U.S. indicted 14 football officials this summer for alleged corruption.
Well, now Platini still may be able to run, depending on the outcome of this investigation.
That's correct. But for now, without him, the race is wide open. But you're right. If he's cleared of any wrongdoing in the investigation, it's possible that he may be the one to succeed President Sepp Blatter come February when they hold the election.
Right, and definitely a disappointment, a huge disappointment for the Korean people as former vice chairman of FIFA, Chung Mung-jun, withdrew his candidacy.
He also received a significant ban, and some of these scandals have been going on with FIFA, so he's out of the running.
Right, it remains a controversy. Bruce, thank you so much for today. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Thanks, Conn-young.
Well, usually the weather gets really cold, super cold on the day of the college entrance exam, but today was rather warm. For more details on the weather conditions, let's check with Jihan.
Hello, Ganyang. Yes, it was a warm afternoon with Seoul soaring to 21, the warmest mid-November temperature on record since weather observation started.
So that means it was the warmest college entrance exam day we had to date. I remember everyone was bundling up in scarves and, and everything, mittens and everything last year and the year before. So can we expect these warm and dry conditions to continue for the time being?
Well, rain is in the forecast, but considering the current dry conditions, the precipitation is actually very much look forward to. In fact, it's already raining over in Jeju, and that rain clouds will gradually spread and will reach Seoul by lunchtime tomorrow. And the amount of rainfall will be moderate with 20 to 60 millimeters for the coastal regions and 5 to 20 for the upper parts, including here in Seoul. And this band of rain will linger until Saturday morning, giving way to a warm autumn day on Sunday. But a large area in northeastern China is still covered with toxic haze, and there's a high chance that this haze could reach the Korean Peninsula by this weekend. So be sure to keep an eye on the weather updates. Now moving on to tomorrow's temperature readings. Daily high here in the capital will hike up to 15. Daegu and Gwangju will rise to 14 and 16, while Busan tops out at 17. And as for the other regions, it seems like Daejeon and Jeju Island will see a high of 14 and 19, while Dokdo rises to 13. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
Well, from all of us here at News Center, best of luck to all the exam takers and their families. And that is our broadcast on this Thursday evening. I'm Moon Conn-young. Thank you for watching. We hope to see you right back here, same time tomorrow on News Center.
Thank you.